actually, part of this process, this awakening, and that's what I call it, is an awakening process, is I've actually recalled a memory. Some of your listeners may go, yeah, this is BS or whatever. But I actually recalled a memory of me in a crib. I'm in the crib at a year and a half old, watching my mom and my real father argue about what they were going to do with me because I wasn't wanted.
Oh my goodness.
At a year and a half old.
That's an imprint.
Yeah, right. And again, those memories start, and science proves now that memories start in the womb.
Yeah.
Right. We just don't have the recall of it, the process. But there is a process because they're there. They're just like a hard drive. You got to just dig in there and find them. And again, the realization that what I've done for 60 years has done everything I could to prove I was wanted.
Welcome to Titans of Transition, featuring real-life stories, anecdotes, and inspiration about pivotal career moments from leaders who have been there. Join host Joe Miller, former scientist and senior technology leader turned executive coach, as he unpacks transitional moments to help inspire change.
So, hey, Robert, welcome to the Titans of Transition podcast. I'm really glad you're on with us today.
Joe, what an honor. This is fun. I've been looking forward to being on with you. It's been a while since you and I have spoken, so this is great.
Yeah, it is cool. So, yeah, I met you in the John Maxwell team, and you were a founding member and helped me along the way, helped me get started. So I really appreciate that. It's good times, such a rich community. What I'd like to do, just to get right into it, is to ask you about the first transition I was thinking about. And that really is moving from college into becoming a firefighter. I don't even know what your major was in school. I'm pretty sure you went to the university up in Fort Collins. Is that right?
No, it isn't actually.
I'm wrong.
I actually did not go to college or school for firefighting. I actually, after high school, went to a technical college in Arizona to be an auto mechanic.
Oh, wow.
That's how I started my career, was actually as an auto mechanic.
Well, I know from previously talking to you that you were a big fan of the teams up in Colorado State, is it?
Yeah.
In Fort Collins?
Yeah.
All right. Well, go ahead.
Well,
take us through that.
It was really, and this ties into a lot of my story, is I went to a technical college because I didn't believe I could really go to college. There was a part of me that didn't believe I could be educated, I guess, right? But I could turn a wrench. That was easy. And spent a year going through that, came back to Colorado, ended up with a divorce, my first divorce. And my second wife's father owned a garage in Security, Colorado, just south of Colorado Springs. And he had also started the fire department there. And we worked on all the fire trucks. We worked on everything in the garage. And I remember he used to keep telling me, boy, you ought to go do your civic duty and start volunteering. You ought to, and I wanted nothing to do with it. As a matter of fact, an old roommate of mine, I remember when we lived together, was going to EMT school, and he'd come home talking about the things he'd seen. And I'm just like, ooh, I'd never want to do something like that. And, I went to a meeting one night to find out about it, one of those informational meetings, left that night with a set of boots, bunker gear, and a helmet. And that started my volunteer career as a firefighter.
Wow. I mean, that's a lot of people have been talking about this right now because of all the fires that are going on in Colorado. So
yeah, that was 1982.
1982.
And actually the full transition came because of an accident. I was actually working on a car with a big old blowtorch and had burned my hand, and pretty severely burned it. Actually, it's pretty interesting. You can't really see it, but I couldn't work as a mechanic. And then that gave me the thing of, I don't know that I want to continue coming home greasy and yucky and smelling every night and working on, and that's just happened to be when a full-time position came open at the fire department. And I moved in as a firefighter, kind of a floater, would do some things and a lot of things in fire prevention when I wasn't on the floor.
Wow. Wow. So yeah, that was sort of a moment then that really popped you into that new career.
Well, and Joe, isn't that what transitions you have to almost, well, for me anyway, I've had to be jolted into sometimes making those choices, making those decisions. I went on for 30 years in the fire service, paid, volunteer, retired as a volunteer fire chief for a local wildland crew, spent 13 years on a national incident management team managing wildfires. We were at Katrina for 30 days. We were on the ground day 2. After retirement, I spent a lot of time traveling the world teaching emergency management. And that was okay. I enjoyed teaching. But as you know, I love people. And again, another one of those transition points is I found myself not being satisfied with the teaching. And I found myself more coaching folks in leadership than I did really teaching how to put together a incident action plan or how to, and that kind of thing. And
so did you find, that was sort of the same for me. Did you find that you would do teaching or you do presentations and then people would then connect with you and then that would lead to a conversation? So sort of an organic process.
It was a very organic process. And I was teaching incident management teams how to work as a team, but it was mostly process and systems. And I'm a process and systems guy, but it was more about how do you lead the team? How do you interact? How do you communicate? How do you bring a team of 6 or 8 individuals together in a natural disaster and do your best? That's where I wanted to teach. And that's where I found these conversations that you were saying. We'd be off the side, having these conversations about, well, what happens when I can't get along with my plan section chief, or what happens when I can't, and that was started to spur another kind of change in me that started to look at what I was doing.
So a little bit ago, you talked about, you sort of got it jolted into the transition. Did you you were moving in that direction, maybe emotionally or in your head, but I'm just wondering, had you already sort of thought that moving into being, full on in as a firefighter was the way for you to go at that time?
No, again, it never was, but it was, I interviewed for that position and came out top, and, they gave me the opportunity to step into it. And I looked at it and thought, geez, I'm going to work 12 days a month. I'll have free time. I'm not going to come home again smelling like grease and oil and everything else. Yeah. It was an obvious choice once I started to get into it, and then I started loving it. Tying forward, what I've realized is part of my upbringing, part of my belief is that I've had to rescue people. And so today I've looked back on that realization. I spent 30 years in a business that I did nothing but really rescue people. So that was an interesting, almost unconscious transition into a purpose of what I had at the time.
When you were with the fire department, you were going out of state, doing the Katrina thing. You were fighting wildfires. I imagine you had a lot of experience with fires that are going on right now in Colorado and in California. By the way, there's a lot in Colorado. It seems like the news just talks about California constantly, but there's a lot of stuff going on there. So
Western Slope right now they haven't received any of the rain. It's been burning pretty bad over there.
Yeah. So a lot of things go on when you're in a job, in a position, in a role that I wonder also, as you said, you really enjoyed it. And what you really enjoyed was the coaching of people, the connecting with people, right? But in the midst of your kind of your definition of your roles or your lanes of what your role is, were evidence then and there in the middle of that, coaching moments in the middle of that, rescuing in the middle of that?
It's interesting because, again, a lot of the time I spent on my fire service was in fire prevention, was in training, and on the floor. So, I was a deputy state fire marshal for a while. I spent a lot of my career in the fire prevention realm, which when you think about it, really is coaching, right? Getting business owners to comply with, there's all kinds of realms of coaching. And as I look back on it, I was in my element. I was very good in fire prevention and training because I've always.
I would say influencing and as well, right? Leading. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, roll the camera forward a little bit here if we can.
Yep. 2011 on Maxwell Team.
Yeah.
Had met John in 2006, somewhere in there at an event. Loved his work, never heard of it before. Started applying it with our volunteers in the fire and our wildland fire team here that I was chief at that time. Loved it. So when the opportunity came to join the team, it was kind of a slam dunk. I mean, why not be mentored by the best, right? And that's John Maxwell in leadership. Became very involved in that. Actually joined to be a speaker. That was my intent to join was how do I get on stage? How do I be a speaker? And Christian Simpson, right? And very, very shortly, what I understood is the impact I wanted to make did not come from stage. It may start there, and that's where I made the shift and went into the coaching curriculum.
Yeah, so for other listeners who aren't part of the Maxwell team, Christian is the one who leads the faculty member for coaching.
A master at coaching.
So, but also wanted to point out you were a founding member.
I was.
So it was early days for the Maxwell team and that team has grown by tens of thousands now members.
Yeah, our first event was like 1,000 people. They had to split it in 2 events because the hotel wasn't big enough to hold everybody in one room. And I think now, where are they, 35 or 40,000 around the world?
Around 35,000 right now, with a goal of hitting 100,000 in the next, I don't know how many years. Yeah. Yeah. All right. So let's explore a little bit of your learnings, because you, as a founding member, you pretty quickly moved in really leadership roles within the Maxwell team as well. But what other learnings did you recall from that time? I mean, you're still a member, but there's other things that I know we'll get to that you're doing. So.
Well, and again, that's another transition. I have chosen to step back away from the John Maxwell team right now. I am not a faculty member anymore because a lot of changes have been going on. And that's, I think the learnings as I look back on it is really to be yourself. It's not about teaching something that you're not doing. It's that congruency. And that's one thing John's about, right? Is making sure that you are who you are. And, some of the learnings was really about leadership and what true leadership was. And that is servant leadership, not management. And that was one of the big things I saw early on, the big difference between true leadership and management. And today, corporate America, we've moved away from, for the most part, that old, management model that Peter Drucker taught for years, and, all of those, because we're more people-centric now. And that's, I think, if anything I learned about the John Maxwell team is my biggest learning is how to value people. I remember, and I don't know, Joe, when you joined, but I remember the first time we were in Orlando. And Paul Martinelli, who was the president of the John Maxwell team, went to the captain of the servers and everybody that served us at meals and said, I want everybody on stage at a certain time. And we didn't know what was happening either, because they marched him in and put him on stage. And him and John acknowledged each and every one of those people that had waited on us for a week and served us. And the one gal, I can't remember, this little Hispanic gal, she was just such a sweetheart, a little grandma. She was beautiful. He gave her one of our challenge coins. Remember the challenge coins? And said, this is very special. And this gal was in tears. And that showed me how to value those that typically don't get valued. And that was a big learning for me. And I still do that today. I ask I go eat out. I always ask the server's name. And now I make a point of it with the mask now is I ask them, can I see your smile? Can you pull your mask down just for a minute so I can see your smile? And it's amazing the connection that I mean, they're like shocked about that. And then, of course they pull them out and they just smile because nobody gets to see it right now. So that's the learning I've taken away from the John Maxwell team, is really how to truly value people.
Now, obviously, part of being a Maxwell team is you have your own business running it in parallel, right? You were part of the community for your own growth and to serve into as a leader, but you also have your own consulting business for a number of years as well. So why don't you talk to us about, those early days kind of running in parallel with the Maxwell team, taking us a little bit more current as we go.
Yeah, well, I knew early on that John Maxwell team was going to be big. I mean, I just knew that. So I knew there was going to be a whole bunch of people using the John Maxwell brand. And that's why I joined, right? Credibility, brand. But I also knew that I needed to make my own brand. And I did that, and then I transitioned into my own business. Now that was with a partner, my first business, Kittridge Connection. And then another transition now, going through another separation and some things happening in personal life. But starting my own business called Focus Point Solution. And that's, that's my brand. And really, I don't associate, or I don't use anybody else's branding, because I'm now building my brand as what I want people to know me as.
Right. So, I mean, were you doing primarily speaking and then coaching? Or, I mean, just wondering what the mix was, what you're moving more towards at this point in time, and how you transitioned that.
A lot of it was masterminds at the beginning, right? Did a lot of leadership masterminds using John's work, then transferring into coaching off of some of those, good corporate training. I'm also certified as a behavioral, a behavior performance consultant. So I use some assessments in that I really specialize with those, going in and forming teams and working with teams with. And then the core of my business is coaching, one-on-one. Really, that's where the difference is made with that. And the Focus Point Solution came about in November, December. I was going through some really tumultuous times, health-wise, spiritual-wise, personal-wise. And I remember John talks about having a word for the year. I remember his word for the year. And so I'm kind of, what's my word? I'm just like, and I couldn't, just like, God, I wish I could focus on this word. And I'm like, what is my word for 2020? And all of a sudden, I'm like, if I could just focus. And I went, focus. That's my word. Because what I had tried to do was be everything to everybody. Mm-hmm. I had all kinds of certifications. I had all kinds of material. I had all kinds of content. And what I realized, I was not doing anything with anybody. So now Focus Point Solution, focus your vision onto your vision. I mean, focus you on your vision for success is what it does. Yeah.
So starting with, you're bringing in temperament, you're bringing in all those behavioral aspects, aligning to skills, aligning to the future vision. And that's part of your coaching process, I imagine, is help people become congruent.
Yes.
To that.
Well, and I mean, and I don't know if you want to go there yet or whatever, but that's the latest transition. Is one of the reasons I've stepped away from John Maxwell team. I was a coordinator for what's called 1 Million Cups, which is an entrepreneur thing across the nation. About 8 weeks ago, I was introduced to a paradigm called human design. And it really goes deep into who we are. And this is what I've learned, is this concept of inner authority and outer authority. Most people, and I didn't, have no idea what inner authority truly is. And it's been really an interesting 8 weeks of learning that, being in line with that. And now decisions are so easy because I can really look at it and say, is this in line? Is it congruent with who I am here? Not what somebody's telling me I need to be. And that's my latest transition is, I've eliminated, I've shut down part of my website, some of my stuff. I'm not doing those kind of things. I'm actually starting next week or week after, not sure when it starts, a certification in human design. And I'm bringing that now into my coaching with behavior driving forces. We're multi-dimensional humans, right? We're not one dimension. We're not just behavior, but everybody wants to change behavior, and they don't understand all the stuff underneath that has us do what we do. And that's where I want to be able to work with somebody to work through those and be able to have them be their true self.
One of my first people I was coached by introduced me to the concept of clarity, a clarity model. And it seems very similar to getting clarity and discovering what that voice in the center, what that inner voice or what that inner world that you have is bringing forward, rather than being driven by reacting to external voices, let's say. Let's explore that a little bit, if you don't mind. I think that when we talked offline several weeks ago about you coming on the podcast, you were telling me about how you had followed the outer, I'll call it the outer voices. I don't know if that's correct from your terminology or not, Robert, but I think that would be interesting to explore, that whole process shift.
Well, yeah. So my family of origin, right, it was very dysfunctional, alcoholic, violent. As a child growing up, we are an open vessel. You go back to the Stickman teaching by Dr. Thurman Fleet, we're an open vessel. So anything that happens around us gets part of who we are. That develops that inner authority in a way, but in reality it does is it suppresses that inner authority because it's outer programming. So for me, my outer programming was I would never make a difference. I was told that I don't know how many times by my stepfather, my teachers, and as I would see things happening in my world, I would inside go, but I was being told that's not what was happening. And eventually you stop believing yourself. You stop believing that inner, and I believe that inner self is God, is what Spirit has put inside of me to be guided by. But it can only get slapped down so much before you start thinking that you're not right. And so go back to it. What did I use 30 years in the fire service trying to do something to make a difference by rescuing people? I actually, part of this process, this awakening, and that's what I call it, is an awakening process, is I've actually recalled a memory. Some of your listeners may go, yeah, this is BS or whatever. But I actually recalled a memory of me in a crib. I'm in the crib at 1.5 years old, watching my mom and my real father argue about what they were going to do with me because I wasn't wanted.
Oh my goodness.
At 1.5 years old.
That's an imprint.
Yeah, right. And again, those memories start, and science proves now that memories start in the womb.
Yeah.
Right. We just don't have the recall of it, the process. But there is a process because they're there. They're just like a hard drive. You got to just dig in there and find them. And again, the realization that what I've done for 60 years has done everything I could to prove I was wanted. And
so this is a core imprint.
This is core imprint.
Imprint that then is a paradigm or a set of rules or a filter by which you see the world and you see yourself.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Now, so what happens then with folks is you get to a point is we start relying on that outer authority. School teaches us, right? How many times have you heard school teach, what they teach us is what they think we need to know. And in school, I was never a good student. I was a different, because that was my makeup. That's who I was. I wasn't somebody that sit there and go, just listen. I question. And I do that today as a great coach. That's what makes me a great coach is I provide deep questions for people to go inside and find the answer. So what people do is they try to find that fulfillment, that success outside of them. Jobs, cars, life, spouses, mates, relationships. And for me, the biggest thing I found is that I don't need that outside love, that I have it here. And I'm okay. I am okay with loving me. And now I want love. There's a difference than need love. But many people look at that outside authority. Look at it right now with the mask, with the stuff, with science, with the shame, with all the stuff that's going on. I kind of laughed the other day. Somebody on Facebook had a thing of, which color should I paint my bathroom? I'm thinking,
Oh, good grief.
it's your bathroom. Paint it whatever you want. But we do that, don't we, Joe? We ask people all of these questions because we don't know how to make we don't know how to go inside and use that inner authority for the right answer that's fine for us.
You know, it's interesting. The word that came to my mind was looking for these answers as such mundane questions like that as evidence of being completely disempowered. You know, so by finding these core, who you really are in your core, it becomes deeply empowering, I would imagine.
Yes. And you've heard John say that, right? 2 great days, the day you were born and the day you understand why, right? That's purpose. That's that inner authority. And most people, and again, I'll quote, Les Brown saying, what richest place on earth is what? The cemetery. Because most people go to their grave with their dreams still inside of them because they're afraid. They're all the stuff. What will they think? What will, if I do this? What will my family think? What will blah, 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 blah. They don't think.
It's interesting. You've also exposed another thought. And one of the reasons why I wanted to start this podcast is because I believe that there is a disquiet in our hearts. And you're really kind of surfacing this as one of the things I'm thinking, where there's a disquiet and people have a notion that they should make some kind of a transition, but they're not even sure what it is. And how do they know? And what is that inner voice saying to them about a directional shift or the fact that something isn't quite right? So I think there's many people who go through this, and not just because of an external event like COVID, right? I think there have been, when I went through my mid-career, I remember this very clearly. I remember going through when I was on business trips and spending my spare time after I'd eat, I'd go into a bookstore, Borders or Barnes and Noble. Remember those things called bookstores?
Yes. Spend a lot of time.
Or it'd be tattered cover, I guess.
Tattered cover. Yeah.
But I remember spending hours looking for the answer in some book. Mm-hmm. And I would buy lots of books and only read part of them and go, it's not really answering my question. So I think that there is this disconnect. It comes from, or disquiet that comes from not being congruent. That there hasn't been that self-discovery with a coach like you, Robert, that helps bring this forward.
I like that disquiet. I like that term. That's a neat
kind of, dissonance in music. There's something you haven't.
Ease,
there's not.
Right? If you look at dis-ease.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's interesting because the majority of my clients have been right in that kind of 50s, mid 50s range where, you've gone through life, you've done everything, and all of a sudden, and I kind of, how I say is that feeling of, is this all there is? Isn't there supposed to be
funny? I just thought of that song. Is that all there is?
Right? Is that all there is?
And that's when it happens, right? That's when you start looking forward. You face your mortality, and you start looking forward and saying to yourself, "What's going to be left after I'm gone?" So yeah.
Well, so let's talk about 2 more transitions with that, if you want to. Is Absolutely. Here's what I'm seeing and I go back to this word awakening, and I'll share a little bit about, I had a medical thing happen in 2016 that I'm realizing was not what the doctor said it was. But what I'm seeing is there are younger generation now that are coming forward and awakening and realizing this inner authority earlier, which is exciting, right? I've got a couple kind of mentees coaching kids. I say kids because they're a lot younger than I am, right? I'm just like, for you to be contemplating the things you're contemplating at your age, oh my God. I mean, it was 50s before I was. And for them to be doing it in their 20s and 30s, that's what this new world, we're going into a new world, not a new world order. Don't go there with that. COVID has shown us that things are changing. Science has showed us that things are changing. Systems are degrading. They're going away. They've been used for hundreds of years. and they're now outdated. So this awakening that I see happening in folks is starting to learn this. How do I tell the right thing for me? And and my coach taught me the way to do it is basically you stand up, you got a question, something's happening. You stand up and you just kind of relax, you take a deep breath, and you call what's going to your sacral, which is the chakra, which is one of your chakras. And you ask yourself, and I just did this with a coaching client the other day over the phone, is you ask yourself the question and feel what your body reacts. For me, no is backwards, yes is forwards. So if I ask the question, should I be on Joe's podcast today? Right? And I do that. I honest to God do that before. And I mean, I didn't even get the question out of my mouth this morning. I was like, okay, we're ready to go today. And that's the other piece of that transition for me is living in today, not the future and not the past. I read the book while I was during COVID, which was a great time for reading, right? I'm not a TV watcher, but I read The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. And it was transformational for me to figure out for most of my time I've spent back there wishing I would have done something different. Or what can I do to make sure I do something up there right? And neither one are there. The only thing we have is right now with you and I, Joe. That's the only thing we have. And that has been a huge transition for me now in satisfaction, contentment. Stuff still happens, right? I mean, stuff still happens. I mean, my problems have not gone away.
It's a huge theme that's coming forward in the guests I'm having is everyone speaks to this point about being in the moment, the power of now. Mm-hmm. And also it ties into, I think, realizing that you're on a journey, right? And, your sense of your calling, your sense of your purpose, your sense of your own identity from the inside, the internal, rather than the external definition, mm-hmm. that will become refined more and more as you go through your journey.
Mm-hmm. Well, and part of my human design is the truth will be revealed over time. So for me, I'm pretty much a snap decision maker because my spleen, which is the part of our human design that like I get these flashes and I'd make a decision on them. But now what I've learned how to do is go, okay, let's check this out. Let's look at this. And it's interesting now when I go back and look at my life, how many of those snap decisions were the ones that really got me in trouble a lot, right? Where took me down a path that wasn't right for me. And, one of the things I realized a few years ago as I started to do some work was that I've lived my life through fear, guilt, shame, and obligation. That's how I've lived my life. And all of those are out there. They weren't here. And once I realized that, it's just been an amazing release of that to be able to live in the right now and be, and just be. I had a friend of mine, she'd tell me, can't you just be? And I'm just like, aren't I? Be? I was doing, I wasn't being. And it's just so nice to just be. It's just awesome.
The other thing about that is you miss what's going on, right?
So many people miss. A couple of weeks ago, I took a drive up in the mountains and over to the western slope and spent some time and coming back over some mountain passes with a friend. And we were just enjoying the woods and the forest and the nice, and people are, they come up speed behind you. And I would just move over. I don't know where they were going, but they were missing where they were, right? They were missing the beauty of the ferns and the forest and how many people do that? We're so busy going somewhere that we totally miss what's happening right now. And that's all we have is right now.
Do you remember Yoda in Star Wars talking to Luke? Take your mind off of where you are, or some statement like that. It popped into my head. I have a strange brain, so sorry about that.
Oh, that's the, our mind, if you think about it, our mind is designed to protect us. Our mind is designed to keep us safe, which means status quo. Our heart, our inner authority, is designed to move us forward, designed for us to grow. So when we start thinking into it, when, I have a coaching client and he's very good at that. What are we thinking? I said, nope, stop thinking. Because every time he thinks, he goes back to his limiting beliefs. He goes back to the programming. He goes back to everything, and it stops him dead in his tracks.
It's a great point to make, because sometimes the changes we need to make, people need to understand the changes you already identified that you want to make, regardless of what they are. You are, from an evolutionary standpoint, your lower brain function, your flight or fright, is predispositioned not to make that shift. So it's prioritized against making change.
Absolutely.
It seeks safety. It seeks consistency. So sometimes people say, why can't I do this? Well, it's because, realize it's okay. You can get through it.
And again, you just said it's, and I've learned this through Paul Martinelli and Dr. Paul Sheely. And who was it? Somebody said the quality of the answer you get depends on the quality of the question you ask, right? I don't remember who said that, but it's like, well, why can't I do this? Your brain's going to tell you exactly why you can't do it. It is going to line up exactly with that, versus how can I do this? Or what's a way to do this? Or that it's that. So how do I move that to that prefrontal cortex, our thinking,
right,
our creative mind, versus the lizard brain that's going to keep us where we are, and into our heart, into our inner authority, to be able to line that up with purpose and passion.
And that's just part of the joy. I coach as well. So that's part of the joy of engaging with a coachee, is it's going through and unpacking that process and making suggestions around helping people discover small moves they can make that might be a little less risky to move into that direction once you've clarified and identified what that direction that's desired is.
Yeah, and the key that I found is again, the little shift from a mentor to a coach is once they identify what they, right? And Christian Simpson teaches us that. And again, right? And Scripture even says the kingdom lies within. I don't have the answer for you, Joe. You do.
Right.
I just got to be able to help you swim through, or open up, or uncover, or discover, or and it's interesting. I've had some coaching clients that really get challenged by that, and they get stopped and don't move on. And you know what? That's okay too. That's okay too. We have to be at that point where we desire to move forward, not where others are telling us. I got somebody right now that, you ought to contact this guy. He really needs you. I said, if it's right, he'll reach out to me. He knows who I am, but I'm not going hunting.
No forcing function here.
No.
So let's turn our direction now. What I'd like to do is have a discussion around, this is the question that people sort of roll their eyes at when I ask them, but it's out there. It's pretty standard. What advice would you give to your 25-year-old self? Or if that's too hard to map to, someone who's starting out, based upon your learnings, what you've learned through going the process of transition, based upon your insights and your epiphanies that you've gone through. I'm trying to get to, what are some practical takeaways? And we've dropped a few of these through the conversation already. So.
Yeah, Joe, I think it's real simple. It really is discover who you truly are, who you are inside, as God, as Spirit, whatever you want to call it, has created you. Right? We are created whole, complete, resourced in every way for success in which we were created, i.e. purpose. So once you discover this, then you can discover purpose. Thus, then everything you can, and then make those alignment decisions to align with who you are, and not who others think you are or others think you should do. That would be my greatest advice. And again, I see that with these young kids coming up, is everybody's trying to tell them where to go, what to do, how to do it. No, let's sit down and talk about what you feel is right. So it's really is about discovering your inner authority, and living by that inner authority. That would be my advice.
Is there also a process where you sharpen your skills of understanding where that voice is coming from?
Yeah.
So that you can differentiate between mom and dad or whatever,
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's not a simple process, and it is a simple process for me. Again, I've been in the personal growth field since about 1982, trying to grow myself and develop, because I've always known there's somebody in here better than me, right? Than the outside world saw me as, and when it clicked, it clicked. And for some, I find when they're ready, and again, when they're ready, it's going to click. And it's just a process of really discovering. I take them on a story. I had a coaching client that she was talking and talking and talking and talking. And I kept hearing this kind of theme that's running through. And I just said, okay, so close your eyes. I want you to think back. When was the first time that ever happened? And she actually went back to being like a preschooler, and something happened, and she made a decision. And I said, great. I said, how long are you going to let a preschooler make a decision now for an adult? Now it becomes a choice, right? Once it's revealed, once we make the unconscious conscious, right?
Yes.
Carl Jung said that, as long as we make the unconscious, right, it'll rule our life. We call it fate. Once we make it conscious, then we can make those better choices. And that's what I love about what I do with some of my processes is just having them go back and not relive it, but just discover that and then figure out that a 6-year-old right now is running my life, right? It's pretty eye-opening. Then you can make better choices.
Robert, do you have like daily tactics or a daily pattern you use or something to stay focused?
Yeah, I've changed my schedule to where I don't do anything business-wise. Right, and I say that I try not to do anything business-wise before 9 a.m. my time. I spend those first couple hours of my morning with me and doing some reading, meditation. Every day is different. I go for a walk some days, but really becoming centered in who I am for the day. And I'm at the point now that I can tell when I don't do that. When I start a coaching call at 8 a.m. in the morning, or I've got some East Coast clients that are, 9 o'clock their time is 7 mine. I'm like, okay, you're pushing it here. That, and the other thing I've done now is I've marked one day during the week off. I call it Cleanse Day Wednesday. So on Wednesdays, I don't do any. It's all my time to make. Typically, I've been going for hikes, bike rides, spending time with friends, good conversations, and it's a way for me to cleanse off some of that other energy that I've absorbed and do things that I want to do in the middle of the week.
That's rich. I remember this one author, Richard Foster, I believe it was, who talked about in the context of meditation as an opportunity to be able to scrape the dust of the world off of yourself, to cleanse, to get all that other stuff out of your world. And so having a tactic, a proactive practice to make sure that you do that, because after a while you get cluttered and muddled.
Yeah. And again, we'll come back to my human design. One of my human designs, my energy, my aura is also absorbing. Part of what I do is I absorb others. And that's been a big learning for me, is all of a sudden to figure out, is what I'm feeling me or is it you? And that's because I love people. So I'd absorb their troubles. I'd absorb their hate. I'd absorb their anger. I'd absorb their sadness. And for me, then it would just all be in here. Now I'm like, okay, that's not mine. It's not my responsibility. And it's been so nice to be able to do that. That's another tactic for me. It's not only in the morning, but during the whole day, is just to be aware. Again, but you've got to be present. You've got to be present to be able to feel that energy.
So what's COVID been like for you? I mean, we're all doing business remotely mostly. I mean, most of your coaching then remote like this, or?
Well, it was anyway. All of my coaching, I don't do any in person. I mean, it always started that way, mostly because most of my original coaching clients weren't here in Colorado Springs. And so I don't do, and I'll tell you, going back to Christian Simpson, what it allowed me, working with him allowed me to do is I don't do Zoom. It's all on the phone. And what it allows me to do is to block out everything, and I can listen at those deeper levels of listening for the feelings, for the energy. COVID was a shift for me. I lost 5 speaking and training engagements March 13th, almost like bing, 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 right? Everything's shut down here in Colorado. Some of them are starting to come back, but it was a real transition for me to figure out. So I'm writing some courses now. I'm doing some virtual things. I'm trying to figure out what I can do virtually also. The other thing for me, health-wise, I had COVID for 5 days. So it was a really interesting experience, which then led to some other health issues that I had to challenge with in April. But everything is now fine and great, and everything is working well. So I honestly believe COVID for me has been an amazing opportunity.
Were you hit pretty hard by COVID physically?
No. I had about a week of chills, fever, no eating, taste. Never had the respiratory fine for, I don't know how many weeks she had it, and actually in the hospital for a week, not on a respirator, high flow O2 kind of thing. And she's still challenged with some leftover impacts of COVID. Of course, it's hitting everybody differently, and that's COVID. But again, I think COVID is given to us for a reason and an opportunity. It depends on how we take it. We really do.
Hey, listen, Bob, I want to kind of bring it home and wrap up a little bit. So how can people reach you? What are your references to your sites and the process of getting engaged with you if they want to reach out to you?
Absolutely. So my website is www.focuspointsolution.com, not solutions, Focus Point Solution. My email is robert@focuspointsolution.com. And I've got a questionnaire. It's called the 10 questions to see if you're sabotaging your life. You can jump in there, and then I also have complimentary coaching sessions right on that homepage that you can schedule a half-hour coaching session with me to just explore and discover what's there.
Hey, listen, Robert, really appreciate your time today, and I encourage all those listening in, if you've connected with anything that we've discussed today and you'd like to take it further, please do reach out to Robert. I know the man. I can attest to his skills as a coach and his heart and his integrity. So I do encourage you to do that. Robert, thanks again for being on Titans of Transition.
Joe, thank you. I look forward to seeing the impact of what you're doing. Take care.